My guest today is Dr. Russel Razzaque. He is a Cambridge academic who focuses on everything from consciousness, democracy, artificial intelligence, to the future of conflict. Okay, let's go.
Conflict, politics, military-industrial complex, technology, war. The Flash Traffic Podcast.
So it causes a lot of consternation in our household.
Same as me as well.
Yeah. So, great book. Would you call it it's not quite an allegory. Would you call it just a metaphor for the future, or what would you call it?
Yeah, as you say, it's not exactly an allegory. It's and we do say in the sort of subtitles a bit of a premonition that this is what we see happening, and there's hope embedded in that. But this is where we see things heading, and it's almost like a bit of a dream you might have about the future, not in a good way, nightmare. And so it's worth telling people about because it feels like it's a bit revelatory. So yeah. Something about looking into the future.
Now, in the book, you have a fictional president of the United States that is an autocrat, a dictator, and kind of an idiot. His name is President Asshole, and it sounds vaguely familiar, but I can't exactly place that character in history.
So asshole isn't his name, but it's something people often refer to him as. That's true. I guess our inspiration came from nowhere, right? It was purely imagination,
purely fictional.
Yeah.
Some of the themes in the book: democracy, authoritarianism, drones, artificial intelligence. You touch on ICE-like components of enforcement. I don't think you actually call it ICE, but it is an ICE-like. I think in the book it was the FBI was the driving force, maybe. But all of those things seem to be coming true this week.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that we set this in the very, very near future. So it's not very distant future. And it's sort of like if things carry on the current trajectory, this is what will appear. And the two things are happening at the same time. An autocracy is evolving, and so you don't have to think too hard to see a couple of steps in front what happens next. And the other thing is AI is developing very significantly as well. And AI doesn't have to be our enemy in this process because almost certainly the ability to think a couple of steps ahead will likely be a power of AI, an asset that AI has. So if we combine the two things, what's likely to happen if the current trajectory continues, at some point AI will predict, and what we say in the book, as you know, is that AI predicts the extinction of humanity. That this current, what's happening politically, the climate crisis that will inevitably ensue if you shut down NOAA and FEMA, and you take away people from all of these, you gut half of the government. Calamity is almost inevitable. And naturally, eventually, human extinction is inevitable if we continue like this. So the book is about that, about what happens when that becomes a fact, that becomes known through AI's projections. And what do people do? How do people react? And there's a group of people, very smart people, who, we know today, for example, are there, who have been kicked out of government, who are very able, committed, patriotic citizens, are probably the only people who can do something about this. And the book is about what they do, how they try to get us out of this.
When we went into Iraq in 2003, we had the same kind of mechanism where we disbanded the military, we threw out the Ba'ath Party under Saddam, and those individuals had certain skills and abilities that were turns out to be valuable for the insurgency, and that kind of parallels what you described in the book. You fire enough federal employees and they become disaffected, and idle hands become the devil's playthings.
That is a really, really good analogy, actually. It's a very good comparison. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what happened in Iraq, right? They sacked so many people that those people were then able to get together, form a grouping that overwhelmed and destroyed and essentially overthrew the government, or its, at least its ability to govern. And you're right, and in a way that only they could, because they had their hands on the levers of power, and the governors of who turned up in Iraq once the US had toppled the regime had just got rid of a whole load of them, and they're the worst possible people to get rid of from the regime's point of view, because they're going to come back and bite you because they know exactly how. And that's exactly, you're right. It's a perfect analogy for this book, perfect comparison, because that's pretty much what we show happens here. They figure things out in a way that nobody else would have been able to do, and they figure out the fundamental diagnosis of what's wrong, where we went wrong, and how we need to fix this. And it's deeper than most people think. It's not just about let's elect somebody else, let's get a better candidate, let's have some better talking points. Let's tweak our policies on the economy. It's not about that. It's about fundamentally changing democracy, because something has gone badly, badly wrong for this to happen, and it isn't happening just because there's a guy called whoever it is who's the president at the time. It's happening because actually the whole system is skewed towards pushing us towards authoritarianism. That actually has happened multiple times in history, and the Greeks predicted that this would happen. They said, we have a representative democracy like this, what will happen is eventually that will become an autocracy. And they said it multiple times, and they predicted it, and it's happened multiple times, and it's happening again. So in order to change it, we need to go back to how democracy was originally invented, and actually how we need to engage everybody in the democratic process, not just pull a lever every 4 years. So that's sort of what our heroes work out.
So it's kind of a paradox, because you have, on the one hand, you have factions that are both powerful, influential, and are the minority. And on the other hand, you have a technologically enabled total democracy, where now we have the means by which anyone could vote on any referendum at any time on their cell phone. Are you not afraid of the principle of none of us are as dumb as all of us? Are you not afraid of the average the average person doesn't have time to even read up on the issues for his local elections or his or her local elections?
So, very good question. And the analogy here is jury service, right? So, and the experiments in this field have happened in something called citizens' juries. And what happens there is that people are required to spend a certain amount of time to join a jury. And when you join a jury, just as you would do if you were engaged through technology in the democratic process, when you join a jury, then what essentially happens is that you are required to study up on the subject, and you're required to listen to expert witnesses, right? So in my day job as a psychiatrist, I'm sometimes an expert witness in courts, right? So you listen to experts in the particular area where you're deliberating on. You participate in a dialogue back and forth. And so you go through a learning process. So it's not asking anybody to participate based on what they know now, or just use their current prejudices or the influence from various sources of media, etc. Actually, it's asking people, engage in the process, take some time to listen to the arguments, to read up, and then you get involved in making some fundamental decisions. And that doesn't need to involve everybody, but it can involve a lot of people. I mean, if we just involved a small percentage of the population, there would still be millions of people who are engaged in this process. And we'd have to find a way to make it representative, to make sure those people were sort of demographically varied in the way that the population is. But if we do that, if we have a good sample size, then we can extend the democratic franchise to many, many more people who can be involved in policy making. We could harness the intelligence of these large groups of people, and we don't have to just rely on a couple of hundred people to make all the decisions. All these lived experience can come in and feed into that process. And it is how democracy was originally conceived. I mean, the original Athenian model had people coming to the town hall together, the town centre and town square, and voting on issues themselves. Now, what we're saying is, because society is so complicated, we need to involve technology like AI to help people to learn about things and to engage and hear from witnesses and hear from experts. But after that process, I mean, there's so much knowledge out there that people can use that they can do a better job. I mean, most governments in the world, democratic governments, are all suffering from the fact that most of our elected leaders don't have the answers, right? And they don't. I mean, stuff is too complicated. But if you do it, if you have a different system, then not only will you likely get better answers because you're engaging in wider circles of experience and knowledge, but uh, the answers, the policies will be accepted more because it went through a deeper, kind of engagement process. So it wasn't just a few people making decisions for us; they were making it with us. That's the sort of difference we're talking about here. I think that could help us move from this trajectory.
So you're not suggesting a total democracy for in the U.S., for example, 330 million people, or 200 million adults, all voting on some national referendum.
Yeah.
You're talking
No.
about highly educated individuals or people that are motivated or interested in the subjects being guided by AI.
Yeah, I would use the jury service as the best analogy because they don't have to be educated. They have to be representative so that there's a sample of different parts of the population. People are educated, uneducated. People are different, Latino, black, white, all kinds of backgrounds, professional, other different sort of working backgrounds. People are not working, and they can be paid to do this work on a regular basis to sort of come up and not the same people, but different groups of people who are selected to engage in the process. I mean, Ireland did this, for example, when it came to abortion. Right? Abortion was a very thorny issue in Ireland for years, right? Because it's a Catholic country, it was illegal, it was very contentious. So they conducted this sort of citizens' convention where they got thousands of people to come together. They selected them based on demographics and background to come together, listen to evidence, hear stories of people, and consider together what they think would be a good idea. So instead of having something like 300 MPs, politicians deciding for everybody, they have thousands of members of the public coming together, hearing evidence, voting, and putting forward some recommendations to Parliament that were then voted on. And Parliament could not really vote against that because they knew it had such a bigger franchise. So we're not talking about involving everybody all the time, but we're talking about involving much more people, much more often, just to deepen the roots of the democracy that we've got.
You present AI as both a savior and, I guess, a forebearer of calamity. Do you think oligarchs or those in power are afraid of AI because it's empowering to the common person?
Yeah, I think the oligarchs, the oligarch class that we have at the moment, are determined to try to control AI, and we've seen exactly that happen with Grok, and with Musk's AI stuff. Called it himself, what was it, Mecha or something? Just in the last couple of weeks, right? So, and reading about what happened there is fascinating because it started coming up with answers that had progressive dimensions to it, right? Talking about things that were just common sense, and Musk didn't like that, so he tweaked it in order to kind of favor some right-wing influences and things like this. And in the end, you get this sort of this complete Nazi that turns up, right? So that's what the oligarchs are afraid of right now. That if AI just uses what the knowledge base is across all of society, just objectively weighing up knowledge, and you've got to, if you do that, weigh up scientific knowledge more than other knowledge, right? So something that I do research. A big part of my job is academic research, and in my academic research, right, we do major randomized controlled trials to determine whether this treatment is better than this treatment, right? And that evidence, that knowledge, that information should weigh more than, say, me just spouting an opinion on something, right? So AI knows that, and that's how it calculates, how it draws things in. But the oligarchs are afraid because it's not going to come up with agendas that necessarily align with theirs, which is basically to make more money and grab more power. So yeah, we're at a turning point here. We're at a crossroads here in what happens with AI. Right? To what extent do they pervert it? But it's interesting because a lot of us, gain a lot from AI. It's very valuable and useful, and it will only continue to be that if it continues to be sort of relatively objective and not weighed in favor of one or other political, arm. So yeah, I think that AI has the potential to be very, very powerful and make a big difference, but it's very important to be vigilant of, the sort of inclinations of very, very rich and powerful people wanting to use it for their own purposes.
You paint a pretty negative picture of the oligarchs and the rich and powerful. Do you think that they want chaos, or that chaos benefits them in any way, or do you think they want a stable kind of status quo?
Yeah. So there's a diversity of billionaires out there, and in the book actually one of the heroes is himself an oligarch, a billionaire, Leo. So and he's one of the good ones. So you can have some good ones, like I can't remember his name, the guy who launched LinkedIn. Actually, he's one of the good ones, Reid Hoffman. Actually. So there are some good ones. So I'm not against all of them, but um, there is a lot of danger in some of these guys and what they want to do, because there is something actually called accelerationism. Right, this is a real thing, and very influential oligarchs like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. These people have loads of sort of hideaways over in New Zealand, and they bought whole big chunks of different parts of the world ready for a calamitous event in the world, which they are bringing about with the idea that, okay, we know that we're harming the environment, we know that we're destabilizing things politically. They're aware of that. They're not stupid. They know the consequences of their actions, but they're justifying it to themselves with the notion that when things collapse, we'll start anew and it will be a better society then, which is total rubbish, of course, because if it works out the way they plan it, then they'll start anew with themselves mainly, right? And these aren't guys who are well known for wanting to build positive communities. So,
Yeah.
they have this idea in their head. I mean, they know it's just like big tobacco, right? They always knew how dangerous what they were doing was before they ever told the rest of it. These guys know how dangerous what they're doing is. They know where it's taking us, and so they're building themselves escape hatches all over the places. And so there's a very, very dangerous cadre of very rich and powerful people right now, and that hasn't been the case throughout history, right? You've had Carnegies, and you've had people who are actually devoted their wealth to philanthropic, positive purposes, and they still exist today, but they are the minority, unfortunately. We've got a group of them who are a bit like a virus, who's sort of feeding on society right now, and wanting to protect themselves from the calamity that they are aware that they are bringing us towards. It's a pretty shocking time.
Do you think they honestly believe they're going to survive an extinction type event? Even if you have an island, even if you have solar power and a giant safe room, the 8,000 square foot safe. Do you really think that they think they will survive that?
Well, I think, I mean, if you just think about what is they're building, right? They're building these big sort of buying up these islands, building these underground bunkers. I think that this means that their estimation is that these extinction type event possibilities are not really about natural disasters, not about a comet. They don't have advanced knowledge of some asteroid about to hit us, but they're human disasters. They're about people rioting in the streets, places becoming ungovernable, anarchy, chaos, destruction, lawlessness. This is what they see happening, right? And it is kind of what they're creating. I mean, look at what happened. I mean, a very early harbinger sign of this was what happened in Myanmar, when all of these people, because of Facebook. I mean, it was very well put by the one of the ministers, one of the government officials there, that um, we were the seeds, but Facebook was the wind. So these ideas about Muslims, Rohingyas, and this group of people, engaging in some sort of murders of others, none of which is true, then got spread. This prejudice then got spread, and there was a mass slaughter of thousands of people, and social media enabled that to happen. And these people know this. I mean, Facebook. There was a fantastic. It's been mentioned in several books actually. Facebook did an experiment over a decade ago in terms of removing content that they deemed to be bad for the world. Right? So it's good for the world versus bad for the world content. They classified content. They removed the bad for the world content, and what they found is that actually there's less conflict, there's more harmony, there's better connection between people, but they were making less money because there was less attention being paid to things anymore. They weren't sucking people's attention, so they switched it off. Okay, we'll carry on. So they know there's the genuine harm that they're putting in there. They're putting the nicotine into the cigarettes, right? They're doing that knowingly, and they're carrying on. So their estimation is that the destruction that will happen is a human destruction, something that you can hide from. Actually, if you're stuck up and you have the right place and you seclude yourself enough, and maybe when they've ended up warring with each other, then we'll be able to come out the other end. I'm sure there's no certainty on anybody's part here, on their part at all, but it's a bit of an insurance. They see what they're doing is detrimental, and they think, okay, well, let's make sure we don't lose our own wealth and luxury, and we'll hide away somewhere if it comes to that.
So they think, even if there's a chance that I survive this, if what I'm doing is going to destroy the world. I mean, we're in a period, and I say this all the time, we're not in a world war. This is not World War III, but we are clearly in a period of world wars right now that's taking place everywhere.
Absolutely.
And if you look at, we just came out of a pandemic with COVID. We have these world wars going on. Heat wave in Europe. If you want something really recent, it appears that we are at least on a local minimum on the graph of human history right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that the disinformation war that's taking place right now. So Russia had been doing this before the internet, right? They were placing articles around the world in newspapers in places they wanted to destabilize, right? And they converted when the internet came about and they created these troll hubs. They've become absolute experts at this now, and they're influencing vast parts of the world. I mean, so much of what is happening in the States is caused by an active process that the Russians and others engaged in. I mean, Finland has done some great stuff because Finland has been invaded by Russia, right? And they spent a lot of their history fighting the Russians off repeatedly. If you go to Finland, you'll see these amazing memorials to the defeat of Russians in war, right? Several times throughout their history. And they are very aware of the war that they are currently fighting with Russia online, right? And they're explicit about it in a way that other countries don't really like to think about. I was reading recently about how they are running kind of online prevention campaigns in which people go to schools and other places where young people congregate and just teach them about how to identify disinformation. How do you know that something is actually made up versus something that's real? And they're educating their public about this, and it's had a major impact. So this is the kind of thing. This is how we fight those wars, by being explicit that we're in one. By being very open about what we need to do to combat it, and by actually engaging in a deliberate process of of helping people to to sort of avoid falling down the rabbit hole. And Finland's a great example of how they're actually actively working on that right now. Yeah. So it is a war in that respect.
I think one of the ironic benefits of artificial intelligence producing these deep fake videos is that very soon they're going to be so prolific and so realistic that no one will believe anything. So all the disinformation will take care of itself because it will eat itself basically, because it's gotten so good and so prolific that you can't possibly believe anything that you see online. And that's coming soon, I think.
Yeah, I agree that's coming, but I don't think that's a good thing. I'll tell you why. Because if you listen to Putin's, sort of the people who orchestrate Putin's politics, and there's some key people who from the beginning have been involved in creating the political sort of setup there in Russia. And their goal is always to create maximum cynicism. We want to put so many. So if they try to, so say for example, when the Russians shot down this this Malaysian airline that was flying over Ukraine years ago, early part of the war, and it was a humiliation. Now they didn't combat the news reports that showed that it was likely to have been, some Russian missiles that were given to the Ukrainian to the people who they put into Ukraine to fight. They didn't directly confront that. What they did is they created 10 other versions of reality. They had a whole range of different stories, and their objective is to get people to the stage where they don't believe anything. Therefore, the truth is no longer valued. So if you get people cynical enough to think that, well, it's all bullshit. I mean, what can you believe? If you get people to that point of cynicism, then they're never ever going to support a positive policy platform. They're never going to do anything progressive. They're never going to, because they won't know what's true and what isn't anymore. So the objective is to confuse people. And so if that happens with deep fake, that you don't even know what's real and what isn't real, that actually adds up to a very bad thing, because there's no way to claw yourself out of it anymore. That's the danger.
Do you think that the news business model may change from one of, let's see how many eyeballs we can get on a page, to people subscribing for a service that provides truth based on the amount of truth that they perceive they're getting?
Yeah, something like that is happening already, and I think that's going to happen. So if you look at YouTube channels, I run a pretty successful YouTube channel now. Within just a few months, I've got 160,000 plus subscribers. Videos with over 1 million, and and this is taken over from a lot of legacy media already, and people are subscribing to figures of authority that they believe in. You look at Substack, and you have loads of people subscribing to their favorite writers and journalists and subscribe. So yeah, people will be subscribing to their news outlet that makes sense to them, and I think there's a danger in that in some degree, where you have folks subscribing to Alex Jones and people like this. But on the other hand, there's also a competition. And if you can validate, so in my channel, I talk a lot about the underlying psychology of what's happening. So understanding, say, Trump's childhood that led him to do X, Y, Z right now. Right? I mean, the way he talks to his supporters right now, calling them stupid, is very similar to how he was spoken to as a child, almost certainly. Right. So that people are very interested in this kind of stuff. So you have to have some level of authority. So I actually think that in the main, it would be a reasonably good thing. So that people will start to gravitate towards those who have credible authority, but it won't be just because it has ABC or CNN or BBC stamped in the corner of the page, right? So they'll be good in it, but they'll also be bad in it because there will be snake oil salesmen, which there has been from the beginning, who are going to mislead people as well. So watching out for that will be important as well. But yeah, the way news media is consumed is going to be a completely different world. I mean, it's so rapidly changing now; it's incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned Trump and his troubles right now, trying to distract his base from the Epstein files. Do you have a bit of Schadenfreude that MAGA is eating itself because they kind of live by the sword and they die by the sword here with the Epstein and the QAnon and all that stuff? How do you feel about
100%.
that?
100%. I mean, I made a video saying exactly that. You live by the conspiracy sword, you die by the conspiracy sword. Trump and MAGA was born of a conspiracy, right? Which was the idea that Barack Obama was not born in the US, right? So birtherism was the original founding kind of philosophy, the founding, logic of MAGA. It came about because of that idea. So Trump stoked that. It's purely racist. The first black man to become president is the one who gets his birthplace challenged, right? Of course, he was born in the US, but they used that conspiracy. Trump used that conspiracy to make himself famous in the political arena, and then he used one after the other conspiracy, always saying simple things like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, people say, right? He doesn't directly advocate for them, but he'll just keep the door open." And so they've trucked in conspiracy, and all these people around him have used the Epstein conspiracy in particular, to come out. And now for them to be hoisted on this, I would say Schadenfreude is the right word actually. It's good that the very thing they've used to discredit and hurt and harm other people is now hurting them more than anybody else. What is the reason for this? Is who knows? But there's something fascinating going on there because he's trying so hard to avoid this being opened up, to the extent that he's attacking his own support. And he's saying, why do they believe this BS? Well, you're the one who spread it. You're the one who told them. Right? It's like saying, why do you believe me? Right? So, yeah, it's incredible, really. It's incredible. And like I said, the psychological side of it, from me, my understanding of it is that Trump never respected his fans. Right? He never did. He said that if I shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, the people they'll all still vote for me. In other words, he thought they were so stupid that if he committed murder in broad daylight, they would still support him. Right? He always thought they were stupid. And that's because fundamentally, if you think of yourself deep down inside, if you think of yourself as stupid, if you don't respect yourself, you're never going to be able to respect anybody who shows any respect to you. So it's this deep flaw within him, which is inherited from his parents. It's the way his parents spoke to him and treated him. And that leads him to then look upon other people in the same way. So he was always going to look down on his supporters, and he was always going to eventually let them know this. And this is the way in which he's doing it now. And it's just very interesting to see the way he's breaking down and the way the whole sort of thing is fracturing. Yeah, fascinating.
I think we're testing the boundaries, testing the limits of Trump's technique of just saying it's true by dictate, or saying it so many times that people are either tired of it or just accept it as true. I think Epstein may be the litmus test for if that is actually a viable, persuasive technique for the long run.
Yeah, and I think that, he's going to attack them in something that he's telling them not to believe something that they believe so fundamentally, because the whole issue of abuse of children is fundamental to the MAGA worldview. They think that they're on a mission from God to remove the political class of all of these child abusing, satanic, devils, and they really believe that stuff, right? So
Mhm.
for Trump to tell them to stop believing in an actual child abuser, in an actual sex offender, right? It's a no-go, right? It's not going to happen because that's foundational to the whole MAGA philosophy. So, he's hit them directly where it hurts, because that's what their whole philosophy is about. I mean, they don't see themselves as a political party. MAGA have never said, we believe in these policies. They've never said that. The thing that unites them is the idea
Mhm.
that they are here to sweep away a cabal. They honestly believed that Joe Biden's inauguration was actually a trick, and Trump was going to turn up in a helicopter, right? And all these soldiers around the Capitol were placed there on purpose so that they would swoop all these, Democrats and all these pedophilic, establishment people up and stick them all in jail that day. They believed that. They were watching the news, waiting for that moment. And then as soon as Biden actually gave the oath of office, people started thinking, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? So that's foundational to the whole MAGA, belief system. And his tactic, it's like going into an evangelical church and saying there's no such thing as God. It's basically what he's done here.
There was an interesting article this morning in the New York Times that looked at Donald Trump's use and the administration's use of the word evil. So calling their opponents evil, as opposed to that word usually being reserved for actual terrorists, actual murderers, people that are actually evil. And the gist of the article, the thesis was that by using the word evil, Trump gives validity to attack his opponents in the most extreme way.
So I think I missed a little bit in the middle, but you said so calling his opponents evil, and then you said attack his opponents in the most extreme way.
It gives him license to attack his opponents in the most extreme way.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's doing something that is utterly unprecedented, not just in American history, but I think in any advanced democracy. In that just a couple of weeks ago, he said, I hate Democrats. I actually hate them. I hate all of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
When have you ever heard a president say that about their opponents, right? And when you do that, when you categorize them like that, evil, hate them, that gives you a license to do anything, right? And that's what he's building up to. He's getting to a stage where he wants to be able to incarcerate, look up, because totally, again, unprecedented for a second-term president. He's not talking about his succession at all. He was asked flatly, is J.D. Vance your successor? And he said no, right? He doesn't want anyone to think about success. It's just like, he behaves like a king. And all kings in history have never said, okay, I'm handing over to so-and-so, right? They've never said that, right? They wanted to hang on to power until they die or are killed, right? And so this will be the same with Trump. He's never going to be in a position where he says, okay, yeah, that's fine, I'll hand it over. So he's going to have to do some stuff to maintain his position, right? Which he's not going to be able to relinquish. Psychologically, he won't be able to do that. So that will involve doing some pretty extreme things to his opponents, which are not extreme, say, to Putin, who would just incarcerate them in other countries. So this is the kind of stuff he's going to have to do. And in order to do that, he has to make people hate them, vilify them. And that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing himself for his own preparation. And he's preparing his base for that as well.
Yeah, to say that you hate Democrats is to basically say you hate, like 40% of the country, maybe a little less.
Yeah.
You're basically saying you hate 40% of the United States.
Yeah. And you can't govern. You can't govern that way, and you shouldn't be in politics that way. I mean, even a journalist, even a commentator, right? I wouldn't say that I hate MAGA, right? I mean, these guys may have, a lack of curiosity. There may be issues in terms of how they process information and things that have happened in their life that make them develop certain prejudices. All of that can be worked with. Can work with everybody, change things for everyone. And I don't judge anybody like that. But so to turn around and say that you actually hate entire swathe of people who disagree with you politically, I mean, politics is politics. This isn't politics when you're talking about hatred. So yeah, he's looking to sort of almost depoliticize politics by taking it into the sort of zone of conflict. I mean, it's like just a quick, the House of Commons in the UK, our Parliament here, the two sides of the chamber that oppose each other are deliberately designed. The distance between them are deliberately designed to be just more than two swords lengths apart. So, back in the day when this was set up 500-600 years ago, they wanted to make sure that wherever people are sitting, there's no way they could harm each other, right? Because this is about jaw, not war. We're here to talk and to resolve our differences that way. And in that spirit, hatred and things doesn't come into it, right? That's you're heading towards war realm again, right? So that's the real danger here, yeah, and that's where he seems to be taking.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that make comparisons with Nazi Germany, the Jews. Would you say that immigrants or undocumented immigrants are Donald Trump's initial Jews? Is he trying to? I mean, it's pretty clear that he's trying to make these people the bad guys. You got to have a bad guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with making comparisons with any previous historic regime is that there's always, history rhymes, it doesn't repeat itself, right? So there's always going to be things that don't quite add up. So people will be able to throw that back at you and say, well, what are you talking about? This is no. So rather than it being a sort of copy of that, we can talk about the playbook of autocrats. The playbook of autocrats is always to find a scapegoat, to find a community of people that you can vilify and unite everybody else around. Gradually, the community of people you vilify builds over time, right? Until you're just left with this sort of small elite group that they believe they are. But yeah, so that vilification is starting with migrants. We've watched it shift before our eyes, right? It started as criminals, right? So if they're criminals, drug dealers, and others who are here from South America, those are the ones we want to remove. Within weeks, it started becoming average people, working people who are undocumented, yes, but they're not criminals. They're working in Home Depot. They're helping people do their gardens. And now these are the ones. So they've already expanded it massively in the space of a few weeks. Where will this get to after 3 years? Right? So they're going to build and build. They've even chucked children into that country, sick children who need cancer treatment. Right? So, yeah, that process, target, vilify, expand, that's what they're doing, and they're continuing to do at a rapid pace. Yeah. And Stephen Miller is a fascinating character. I mean, he seems to be, this is in his DNA. I mean, he can't stop himself with this. Yeah. Incredible.
I mean, you have to be a true believer to be in this administration. That's what makes it so scary for me. Do you think you wrote a book called Human Being, Human Bomb about turning people into extremists? Would you say part or all of the extreme left, would you call them that level of extremists?
So the book I wrote was about sort of suicide bombing and the way in which terrorism was happening, and I kind of saw that, studied it, sort of Islamist and other forms of terrorism, going on, and how people get radicalized by being exposed to these extreme ideas. And extreme ideas are usually about dividing the world into black and white, and turning history into this cosmic struggle between black and white. And because you've had some lack of, kind of respect in your own life from early on, you suddenly feel embraced and enhanced by being part of this big cosmic struggle. And all of that is directly transposable onto Trump and MAGA, right? So people who haven't felt respected, haven't felt that they've been given a chance and a shot, suddenly feel taken seriously by this movement that tells them, you know what, you're actually special, because these kind of prejudices that you have are right. You're better than these people. And they've been suffering for years of the idea that, these diverse communities are overtaking us. They're afraid of that. And so Trump tells them, actually, that you're better than them. You can look down on them freely and openly. And so this process of radicalization that has happened in various kinds of kind of terroristic circles is happening here, and it's what basically Trump is doing. It's a process of radicalization. And there's whole swathes of people who are being radicalized by this process. And it isn't Trump on his own, of course, doing it. This is a groundswell. He's just responding to a sort of movement that's happening. It's already happening in the country. I mean, you see him in his rallies sometimes in just in real time, amending his positions based on the crowd. I mean, he's really good at reading a crowd. So he's a product of it as much as a creator of it as well.
Would you say, this is kind of a crazy question, but would you say the people that invaded Congress on January 6th were not radicalized enough? And what if that were to happen 3 years from now? What do you think would happen? Do you think they were even more radicalized now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they are. And I think that January the 6th was like a staging post, right? So if you can do that and then get pardoned and get away with it, right? That means you're going to be emboldened, A, to do it again, and B, for other people to join you, right? and to do worse things next time, because you feel the whole cadre of people now feel immune. It's not just the people who are released; the ones who committed violent acts on that day were also released. But there's a whole lot of people who watched that and thought, "Oh, I can get away with this too. So long as I'm doing it for Trump, I can get away with this too." So he's created a channel that never existed before by pardoning the January 6th folks. Now, January the 6th could have gone a very different way if Trump was impeached, if the Republicans voted for his impeachment and he was barred from becoming president, all these things. So history could have been very different, right? But what's happened now is that those guys have been given a new leash. So it's shown people that you can learn from and build on this, right? We can do more next time because we are even more impervious to legal sanction in future. So yeah, it feels like a staging post to something much bigger that could happen. And it's happening. I mean, it happened in Brazil. Right? After Bolsonaro lost his election, the same thing, almost exactly the same thing happened there. They stormed the parliament. The massive chaos on the streets, and so containing the rage when they finally relinquish power or have it taken away from them is going to be a major thing. And unfortunately, January the 6th could just be the first single of what that actually looks like.
In your book, you have an Easter egg, and I don't know if you're probably aware of it, but I don't know how much of this story you knew. When I was reading about the artificial intelligence predicting the end of humanity, you mentioned the Great Filter, which is a principle that societies on other planets, in other galaxies, you just reach a point where you can't go any further as a being, because you've just reached the Great Filter. And that is one of the explanations of the Fermi paradox that you mentioned in the book, about why we have not been visited by other civilizations from other planets, is because they're all dead, because they've reached the Great Filter and nobody has surpassed it. And the Easter egg in this story is that Enrique Fermi, which that paradox was named from because he came up with it, he was a golden child of Mussolini's Italy, and he was a nuclear physicist, but his wife was Jewish. And so when we talk about radicalization, authoritarianism, and all of this, that's kind of an Easter egg in your book, like a subtle kind of secret, subtext that Enrique Fermi had to leave Italy because his wife was Jewish, because they were oppressed. And the same thing. And basically your book is about that exact thing happening in the future, in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right.
My question, the most important question to come out of the book for me was, is there really 9 acres of giant tunnels underneath Disney World? Is that true?
There is something big like that. Yeah, so I wrote this book together with Trish McGregor, who's a award-winning novelist, and she's great work with the prose, and we really work great together. And she's the one who discovered this, actually. While we were writing the book, I think a neighbor or somebody came up and in a discussion, it just randomly came up that, there's this, and she said, "What? This is perfect." So that we came up with that. So yeah, I don't know how many acres exactly, but there's a vast space, subterranean space under Disney World, just to keep the whole thing going.
When I read that, I said, there's no way, because, I've been to Florida a lot. The water table would flood those. There's no possible way you could have that many giant tunnels underneath Disney World. So I chat GPT'd it, ironically enough. And what they did was they built the tunnels above ground, and then they built Disney World over those tunnels. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Wow, genius. Really
obviously not the most important part of your book, nor the most interesting. But Russell, thank you for your time. Your book is We the People, A Premonition. It's hard to even say it's about the future because it is happening as we speak. But the book comes out in August. Is that correct?
Yeah, August 23rd. Yeah.
Yes, I got an advance copy. I read it. I loved it. It's a very important analogy, metaphor, whatever you want to call it, for what's happening right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Santi. It's been a great pleasure. And I'm really, really glad to hear you enjoyed the book. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yes, thanks.
The Flash Traffic Podcast.